Cleaner races prevailed at Zandvoort, and that was in spite of the challenging and tight layout. Now we focus forward and attempt to tackle the beautiful Italian hills of Mugello. Winding like pasta and with a front straight longer than an endless supply of breadsticks, this place will require the drivers to bring an appetite for speed as we get ready to watch the PCA Sim Racing Series 11 Club Class. And you'll see it all live here on RaceSpotTV. Hi, I'm Joe Peak, and with me in the booth tonight is Reese Gardner. Behind the scenes is our director, Premier Cisneros. Now, we saw last time with the challenge class last Wednesday that it looks like it can be tough to pass around here, so track position probably going to be critical tonight here, Reese.
Yeah, indeed it is. As we saw last week, Mugello highlighting how much of a twisty and difficult circuit it is to pass on. As you said, there's so many quick corners around this place. An overtaking opportunity at the end of the long straight and potential passing opportunities into turn 2 and turn 4, maybe even turn 12 if you get a good run. But the entries to these corners are so flowing and you can push so hard on entry that often we found that the positions were defended quite easily. We'll see if anything's different this week.
Indeed, and right now in the championship, Klaus Nielsen is leading by not the biggest of margins over Terrence Tong. Matthew Jokel only a single point behind Terrence, so top three see basically about 14 points between all of them. So that could switch around, and we have to remember this is the penultimate race in Series 11. So it's going to be important that they set themselves up for Daytona in 2 weeks' time. From there, it gets extremely tight going down through the order where you see only 14 points between 4th and 7th place. I guess you could really say down to 17 points, down to 9th with 43. So it is going to be all to fight for here today. Positioning yourself in that qualifying, probably going to make a big difference, which will start in a few moments' time. They're actually in the last few minutes of the warm-up here, and then they'll get underway to try and decide who is going to be starting where along the grid in this race. We've also seen one of the big things is trying to stay out of trouble, Reese. They do have live stewards in this series handing out penalties, so you need to race clean or else you're going to face the wrath of those watching with an eye over the field.
Yeah, exactly. Race Control were very quick to assign penalties in the challenge class last week, so looking forward to seeing the exact same here tonight. Of course, this being a higher class of racing, faster drivers, a little bit more skill at their disposal, I'm hoping that there's going to be a bit less penalties handed out and we can see some proper hard racing here. But once again, we'll have to wait and see.
This is the club class, as we mentioned. So this is the second highest tier. The next one going to be tomorrow night with the pros. So this is where things are getting very serious with the speed and skill that these drivers have. Also, with that, this means that this is the first of the 4 races that we're covering here on Race Spot that are going to be open setup of these 2 weeks of racing at Mugello. So now that raises the question, Reese, how do you go about that in this car? Do you try and take some of the wing out to give yourself a better shot down that main straight to make the passes, or do you try to make it quick through the twisty bits and just try and run away from your competitors there?
That's the compromise you got to take here at Mugello. I would say that it favors a higher downforce setup with so many quick corners across the back half of the circuit. Pretty much aside from the main straight, every single corner flows directly into the next one. So I think the drivers at the very least will be putting a little more wing on the cars, but I think they'll be focusing largely on the suspension and anti-roll bar setup, trying to get a bit more rotation through these chicanes. I think Mugello is a circuit where a pointy car is a must-have.
That's a good point. That it's got so many switchbacks, just back and forth and back and forth. Very few corners that don't see a change of direction and continue on the same one after the other. But they've got race control in their ears right now, so that means that they're getting pretty darn close to the session switching over. You can see in the upper left hand, it's still just about 30 seconds away. Also, if you're new to this series, there will be a pit stop as well. They have limited the fuel tanks of these cars, so You can expect to see them in to top up on fuel. Nobody usually takes tires. It's just too quick in these cars to really merit it, and they'll be back out. But you got to get the right pit strategy, and you got to try and extend that fuel as far as you can to be quick out there and get the shortest pit stop that you can get here at Mugello. Love the views that we've got at this circuit, just beautifully nestled within the hills, and definitely one of the more scenic spots that iRacing has added recently. Here we go then off into the qualifying. Only 3 laps as well. And there's some places, Reese, that you can have those laps deleted.
Yeah, Mugello, of course, is a motorcycle circuit usually. So it has big, wide, flat curbs. And when you're driving on 4 wheels, it's very tempting to run beyond the limits of the racetrack and use a bit of the runoff area to gain some extra time. But iRacing's track limits are in full effect here. And essentially, it's the edge of the curbs that are the limit. You can have 2 wheels still on the curbs in most places around here. But if you go beyond that, all 4 wheels off the racetrack entirely, you will get an off track. Your lap will be invalidated. And it's a long lap around here in these Porsche 911 GT3Rs. So you're going to have to wait a long time to get another chance.
Yeah, it's close to 2 minutes to get around here. So if you mess up one of those laps, you better hope that you've gone out with enough time to get your other ones in. They should have plenty. 10 minutes is more than enough time to get all 3 down, but some drivers might be doing a little tweaking in the garage to their last little bit of qualifying setup before they get out there. So some might not emerge onto the track till later. I say that, actually, I look over and everybody is out on course. So nobody is dilly-dallying and thankfully is wasting no time.
Indeed. You add the out lap and the 3 hot laps together, it adds up to about 8 minutes. So if you're not out of the pits by now, you're going to have some trouble getting to the line. Jonathan Rieber here in the 147. He was a bit down the order in the practice session. Actually didn't set a time, one of 5 drivers to do so. So we need to wait a little to get a pointer on his outright pace. If you're curious, the fastest time in practice was Julian Velez, the number 33, setting a 147.1. So that is the marker that everyone will try to beat. He was 4/10 ahead of the rest of the field.
Yeah, Rieber coming down into San Donato now, getting ready to start his, well, he has started his flying lap. We'll watch those sector times to see how he's faring throughout as we check in on Terrence Tong in the meantime in the 388. Also swinging through, climbing up in the first part of the track where it's pretty much all uphill until you get just past Borgo San Lorenzo, and then it dives downhill through Casanova, through Savelli, into Arrabbiata 1 and 2. This is Klaus Nielsen into Casanova right now. Very swift part of the track.
Yeah, and you've got to make sure that you don't overwork the fronts through this section because they can overheat quite easily if you're pushing too hard. Looks like Terrence is making short work of that section. The tires get a little rest before this S-bend here. Looks like he's gone a little deep though. You've got to gear up for the exit through a lot of these S-bends at Mugello. It's all about setting up for the run out of these significant corners like this one, the second last proper corner on the track. Get on the throttle nice and early and then out through the flat out S-bend. You can see how much of the track he is using there. Those are those track limits in action. Once again, as long as you have 2 wheels on the curbs, you are good. Here comes Tong to the line.
And as he crosses first lap, it's going to be a 1:47.4 for him. Not as fast as Velez without his or with his practice time being backed up here in qualifying, although it is very, very tight. 17 thousandths between P1 and P2. Our points leader was in third. Now he's been bumped down as Lenny Holland goes quickest. Mario Gonzalez in the meantime in the 777. He'll cross the timing line, 48.2. That'll slot him into 16th.
Mike Adams still trying to get a time on the board there. Brett Holmes setting a 148.5. The times are actually looking very close here on these first laps. I think the tyres still getting up to temperature, and drivers just setting bankers for the first lap. They want to make sure that they actually get a time on the board to start with, and then they can start pushing, and then we'll probably see laps closer to what Velez set in practice. Current times are about 3/10 behind ultimate practice pace.
Yeah, you're right. It's relatively cool, 73 Fahrenheit on the track surface, only 23 Celsius for the metric folks. But that probably does take a bit to really get them into the right working order. Hopefully by that second lap, they should be well up and ready to go. As we watch Scott Bowers, still missing about 4 drivers at the bottom who have not set a time quite yet. You talked about how close it is. Top 18 are all within a second.
Yeah, that's some crazy gaps there, and if it stays that way, we're in for one heck of a race. It's going to be so much fun to see what kind of times drivers can get. We see improvements starting to come in. Meanwhile, Velez to the top again, 147.4. That's only still 18 thousandths ahead of Lenny Holland. Big improvement for David Fernandez. Up into 5th, Mark Collingwood up into 13th. That's a huge gain. Kim Fricke up into the top 10, and Holland responds the first 47.1 of the session.
Whew, put it a quarter of a second quicker than Julian, so he has definitely got some pace underneath him. What can the 33 do to try and top that one, and especially considering Lenny has also got one more lap to help him out?
Well, he'll be hoping that the exit of that corner right there still stays with him. There's so much time that you can take here at Mugello, running those curbs to the very limit. Velez at the moment coming around the back half of the circuit on his final lap. And you can tell that he's very comfortable around here. He's judging the speed at those apexes perfectly.
Looks like Lenny's not going to be able to respond. He spun off coming up the hill. Wasn't sure quite which corner it was in, but that means that Velez could try and snipe that one back, but it's going to take a massive effort here as he goes through the Biondettis. And right now I'm showing him at just about even with his quickest lap. That's not going to do it unless he has a phenomenal final corner.
Well, he gets on the throttle as early as he possibly can. That's a nice clean exit, and it's the run to the line. That is it. The lap is set from here. Across the line he comes, and it's going to be a 147.4. He's not going to be able to respond.
That will not do it. Terrence Tong doesn't have his last lap count. He must have had an off track somewhere, so he'll also stay in 3rd. No, he won't. Jokel just comes up to the inside of that 2nd row by snatching a 47.4.
He does indeed, up to 3rd. Nice job there, and that's 400ths ahead of Tong's fastest lap. Coming up to the end for Klaus Nielsen, as you mentioned, the points leader of this series, and a 147.3 is certainly going to help things out for him. Fantastic job, up to the front row.
Nicely done by the 04. Stepping a little bit back for Peter Kummer now in the 333. And so let's see. He's showing on a slow one for me. Actually, he's already completed all 3 of them now that I'm checking the lap counter for him. So looks like he is done. Checking if any other drivers have a lap left. It looks like David Glenn, who we've got on screen now, is on his final flyer. He sits down in 23rd, needs just over a 10th to overtake Gary Reese.
Indeed. Let's see if there's any more improvement and he can elevate himself further up the field. To the line he comes, and it's not looking too quick here. 148.4. Yeah. But that does improve his position by a couple of places. At the very least, an improvement at the end. Looks like Chris Sherburne is the only driver yet to set a time, and he's approaching the final corner now. I'll be hoping that he actually has a time on the board here, because this is only his first lap. He was late getting out.
Exactly. He better hope this one was clean, because he's not going to be able to do anything after this. They are not allowed to finish their hot laps here Once that timer runs out, he'll cross the line 49.7, and it does jump him up to 28th, but he's only quicker than 2 other cars, so it's only a mild improvement from where he would have started. He didn't get any practice laps in, though, so he might have needed that just to really get himself up to speed on this one. That means our grid is now set for the club class, and that means that Lenny Holland has put it on to the pole over Klaus Nielsen, despite Lenny not having that final lap, with Julian Velez starting in 3rd. Matthew Jokel will be in 4th position. Terrence Tong will be P5. Then you've got David Fernandez on the outside of row 3. Andy Jenks will start 7th today, as Rick Reinsberg will be P8, and then Kim Fricke in 9th. Joachim Baker will start inside the top 10 with Peter Kummer there in 11th, and then rounding out row 6, it is going to be Mario Gonzalez. Reese?
13th, Michael McKinney starting alongside Ben Lung, Mark Collingwood and Mike Matson on the 8th row there, with Charlie Boyer just a 100th of a second behind in 17th, Patrick Adamczyk in 18th, 19th place, Danon Fairburn with Philip Milan starting alongside, David Glenn and Brett Holmes in 21st and 22nd, Gary Rice and Jonathan Rieber on the 12th row, Scott Bowers and Matt Owens 25th and 26th, Adams and Sherburne 27th and 28th. Our field rounded out by Hank McCarthy and Duncan James, and James's lap a lot slower than everyone else's, so he'll be hoping that his race pace is up to scratch and he can try and improve.
Looks like his first lap was the only one that counted, and then the second one was deleted. Didn't take the 3rd lap. I wonder if he had a wreck somewhere in there and just didn't get to really put a proper one down as they wait for the pace car to take off. It is early in the morning, just past 10 a.m., a virtual standard time in Italy, so drivers will have the sun continue to rise and come up, and that means that we'll likely see the temperatures on the track also raise as things carry on. Thankfully, no rain expected here in this series, so it's all dry all day for these drivers and all about trying to pound out those fast laps.
Indeed, and the track being 22 Celsius here means that once the tyres do get up to temperature, there's going to be a lot of pace at hand here. So many long corners at this track where grip will be at a premium. If you can get it, you'll gain a lot of time. But remember, this is all about racing against everyone else. And if if Challenge last week was anything to go by, it's going to be very hard to actually make those passes happen. So Lenny Holland will be looking here for the optimum rolling start, try and get a gap over Nielsen and Velez. Velez still looking very quick after practice. Let's see if he can contend for the win.
Velez is in the championship, but Holland is not. So Nielsen's main concern is at 33. If Lenny gets a jump on him, not the worst thing in the world. He doesn't get max points, but as long as he beats his rivals heading into the final round to make sure that he continues to stretch away from them by the last race. They stay patient, waiting for the call from Barney on the flag stand now that the pace car is in. Usually a long wait here before they get the signal to go, and there it is. Green flag is out. Holland is not good off the jump, actually. He's a little bit slower than Klaus, who's going to have to try and go around the outside. And we've seen it is possible to try and make that long move if you set yourself up the inside of Luca. So let's see who is able to keep the grip. And the first time out, it looks like just edging in front of him, it's going to be Lenny.
Only just. Tiny bit of contact between Holland and Nielsen, and Holland absolutely nailed the apex there. That gives him an extra car length of breathing room over Klaus Nielsen. A lot of jostling in the mid-pack as well. Terrence Tong having to give up the position to David Fernandez for last position in the top 5. And caution has been thrown by race control. There's been a problem further back. We're seeing David Glenn and Philip Milan having to get back up to speed.
Yeah, this was close to the back of the pack. I'm kind of surprised this pulled out the full course yellow. Looks like Philip Milan, I think, is the first to have a serious issue. There you can see him in the yellow car. And then unfortunately, everybody behind him, with it being the first lap, the first few corners, things are so stacked up, it was difficult to avoid.
It was indeed, and it looks like as the caution was called, Ben Lung was spinning, and that's what Charlie Boyer was greeted with as he came through. Lung actually hitting the anti-cut curb on the inside of the right-hander, and that sent him around. That wasn't what the caution was called for.
Yeah, but I'm sure it added to their reasoning to finally throw it out. David Glenn was also involved in that opening wreck, unfortunately, and Duncan James looks like he got turned around in it. I see a bit of contact for Matt Owens and Scott Bowers too. Now, the good news is that they have one spare car waiting in pit lane if they get damaged. So those involved in that wreck, and this is why they will sometimes throw these yellows, can go in, grab that spare car, and get back out there and restart the race with a clean slate.
Yeah, Charlie Boyer at least will be very happy to see that. So will Philip Milan. Boyer missing his rear wing right now, which is obviously not ideal. Decides to jump into the pits and get a fast repair done as the safety car is now out on circuit. Of course, we're running to oval caution rules, which means pit road is closed initially. Wait for the field to compress, and then pit road will be open.
Yep, so I imagine we'll see at least a small handful of drivers dive in, take that spare car, and get back out there. The other thing this does do is this widens the pit window significantly. Now, they are likely unable to make it all the way to the finish on this set of fuel, but it's going to make for a much shorter pit stop. And also that means that you have to pay attention to how much you need. If you put in your normal amount of fuel, Reese, you're going to have a longer stop. You're going to get jumped by some rivals.
Indeed. These laps spent running at low speed under safety car conditions saves you a lot of fuel. The race is timed and the clock is still going as the caution is running. So it shortens the total amount of laps you're going to have to complete, and that means potentially up to 5 or 6 liters that you don't have to put in the car.
So who's going to be paying attention on that one? Make sure that they don't get caught out. We've had a few full course yellows already in Series 11, so the drivers should by this stage be aware, but sometimes you just don't know. Especially, I believe this is Lenny Holland's first race that I'm seeing in the club class, so I'm not sure if he's aware of what to expect on that front, but he's got everybody stacked up behind him now, and he's dutifully following the pace car around before we get going once again. And drivers are just going to wait for that pit entry before we finally see who is going to dive in and try to take that spare car before we get going in the race itself. But like I was mentioning, this is really going to be perhaps one of the most important ones because next week is, or well, 2 weeks from now, I should say, is at Daytona. This one, things are so much more in your own hands here, Reese. At Daytona, if you get caught in a huge group of people, you can't always shake your rivals there.
No, Daytona, a combined oval and road course, and a lot of time is spent flat out. Mugello does have that long front straight, but slipstream is not as powerful as it would be at Daytona. So I think the drivers will be getting their practice in over the next couple of weeks and figuring out, okay, if we're X amount of seconds away from the other cars, we're not going to have the benefit of the slipstream. We'll be caught by the drivers behind. So we're coming up to pit lane now, and I wouldn't expect anyone from the front to come in this early. The caution was thrown only at the start of lap 1. So everyone is still going to have to make their way into the lane at some point for a fuel stop later on. It's too early, really, to get the fuel in because the fuel tank is still capped. You won't have enough to get to the end. But this is, as you said, the opportunity for drivers with damage to make their way into the lane and get some repairs done. Philip Milan is not going for the pit lane, but no surprise to see that Charlie Boyer is. I think lack of a rear wing at Mugello is not ideal.
No, certainly not. You do bring up an interesting idea, though. You're right that it's too early. I think they need to get to somewhere around 10 minutes into this race to get to the pit window opening. If you are at the back, I always think, you mentioned the overrules. I always think to that if you're at the back of the train, I mean, what could you lose from coming in, topping up on fuel, and have an even shorter pit stop when you get to your actual scheduled pit stop?
Yeah, exactly right. That's something Charlie Boyer will be thinking about as he's getting those repairs done in the lane. And he was actually spent a bit more time in there than just taking a fast repair. So I think he's done exactly what you're talking about there, Joe. He's topped up the fuel tank. That means he's going to spend less time taking fuel when he takes his actual stop, and he might be able to jump quite a few people.
Nobody else took him up on that. In fact, nobody else pitted out of our 30 drivers. So only Charlie taking repairs, and we think possibly some fuel. So he could try and get an advantage. Now, yes, he will restart at the back of the field, but like you heard Reese mention, he's going to have a shorter pit stop. So he's going to jump some drivers. He essentially got a free couple seconds of refueling that doesn't cost him anything.
Yeah, especially considering, he was already at a major disadvantage being involved in the crash that happened as the caution came out. Well, the caution has been shortened by race control, and it looks like we're going to be going green at the end of this lap. So not much time left until we can get back to racing action, and hopefully we get a few laps in without another caution on the line.
Exactly, and we have seen the caution come out a second time, I think at least once or twice in Series 11, so it's not unheard of. It's very rare, mind you, so cross your fingers that we don't get that again and we can get going racing from here. I'm pretty sure the drivers have heard from race control at this stage. Like I said, this series actually prides itself on very clean starts. So I'm sure they were given a little bit of a talking to and told to make sure and keep it clean. But it is single file, so that will tremendously help them try and stay away from each other on this latest restart as they head down through Coria and Tau. And just a couple more corners before we get going.
All right, lights off on the pace car. And it'll be a single file restart, which means Lenny Holland is going to have a bit less trouble keeping everyone behind him coming into turn one. But we will wait and see. Mistakes can creep in for anyone at any time. Let's see how the midfield fares as well.
Also, we got news during the caution. There's going to be some penalties handed out. Looks like we'll get that. Actually, they didn't say who it was for yet, so we'll find out soon enough. They did say they will be handing them out once the green flag flies. So let's see who winds up getting the ire of the stewards here at the start at Mugello as the pace car getting ready to release them for the second time today. Last time Holland did not get the best of starts, but he didn't lose the lead. What did he learn? And will he have at least a little bit of a better jump over Klaus Nielsen? Ooh, there was a bit of a stop-start there. I don't believe that is within the rules. We'll see if that also gets some sort of penalty. Green flag is out. No change between them, and Nielsen did not get a jump because of that stop-start as they head down into the first corner once again. A little bit of side-by-side between Fernandez and Velez.
Yep, battling for fourth place there. Fernandez having to fall back in line as they make their way through the first of the chicanes here. And Lenny Holland is trying to get up to speed, but I'm noticing his car behavior is a little wayward. He was having some trouble keeping the car on the straight and narrow, and Klaus Nielsen is immediately on the attack. And oh my goodness, that is something happening further back in the field on the replay. Who's that? That's
Kim Fricky.
Yeah, the number 66 getting hit off there. So the car involved hitting Kim off, I think will be at the attention of the stewards very shortly.
Yeah, absolutely. I now see Mark Collingwood plunging down my timing screen, so he seems to have had a problem as well. We didn't get away clean on this one, but at least we didn't have a massive wreck. There's Mark, also missing his rear wing. Let's see how he got. Well, he was already gone.
Oh, okay. So he got some rear-end contact earlier on in the lap, lost the rear wing, and of course that's what happens when you don't have an aerodynamic device on the rear of the car. It just goes around when you turn in for a corner.
Okay, then. So apparently that's going to be a rough day for him, because now he's either going to have to get repairs and get an extra stop, or at least come in very early, or try and suffer without that wing for a little while longer, as we see Holland come off of the final turn onto the main straight. Nielsen keeping within touching distance, but I don't think he's close enough to try and make a strike out of this. In fact, he might be more worried about Joko behind him.
Yeah, there's a bit more of a gap between the lead and second than there is between second and third. Coming into the first turn here, nice early turn in is the way to go. Get to the inside as quickly as you can. But Klaus Nielsen getting a better exit than Lenny Holland, and clobbering the anti-cut curbs there was Holland. You've got to be careful of that around Mugello, and that has put him under attack here from Nielsen. Defensive line into the chicane, and Nielsen's going to have to stay behind for a little longer, but you can tell it's probably only a matter of time before there's a change for the lead.
I was going to say, what little racing we've seen from Lenny, he has not looked all that comfortable here. And Klaus trying to capitalize on it, but he's still got to worry about those behind. Matt and Julian are breathing down his neck as well. And it's essentially still a 4-car train at the front.
Yeah, beautiful to see them making their way through these corners as we get our first penalty in from race control. Duncan James and the number 26 black flag for jumping the initial start. So he'll have to jump into the pit lane at some point. Noticing that Nielsen, he was gaining a bit on Holland, but it seems like he's had to back off a bit. I think he was having some problems keeping the car online there.
Well, these GT3 class vehicles do make quite a bit of an aero wake, so maybe he was struggling there behind Lenny to try and stick with him as they'll head down through Bucine. And this is perhaps the most important turn on the track. He needs the best launch possible as we check back in with Tong, who's fallen down to 6th now. And things you can see up ahead, Klaus is looking like he's gaining a little bit.
Yeah, it looks like he is just catching the slipstream. It is a draft train at the front of the field, and I'm not seeing much in the way of moves being done into turn 1 at the moment. Everyone's just nailing their exit from the final turn. It's all about how you navigate this back section of the track. That's what's defining the racing here.
Milan was given a black flag for causing the wreck on the initial start, so he's serving that now. We stick with this battle for P1. Klaus seeming much stronger through this first part of the lap. Jokel in behind him as well. Fernandez also kind of catching up to this group. It's starting to feel like Lenny is a little bit of a cork in the bottle, at least in the early part of the lap here.
Yeah, he's not as comfortable, clearly, as everyone else behind him is, and keep an eye out through the double right here across the top of the hill. See how much time he loses on the exit there. Klaus Nielsen nailing the run up the hill, and Holland having to go slightly preemptively defensive. Narrower turn in for this chicane here. So, I mean, actually, it looks like he's pretty good on the exit. So that's where Klaus Nielsen is losing most of his time. And this is where the likes of Jokel and Velez are starting to gain.
Yeah, so it's kind of a switch back and forth, and this is exactly when he needs to be close to Lenny. Like I said, you need the run out of this final turn for one of the few places you can realistically pass here down into San Donato. He regains a bit through the final chicane and into the last turn, but he had lost so much time, it goes right back to how it was last lap. It is a bit of a yo-yo.
Yeah. That's another defining factor of how everything's going here today. Slight slipstream for Klaus Nielsen. Again, early turn in for Lenny Holland, and this time he sticks to the inside all the way through the first turn. I mean, you can just tell Nielsen is itching to get past, isn't he? He wants to extend his championship lead. and he wants to try and get that pass done as early as he can, but it's so hard to pass around here, so difficult to make the move unless your rival makes a mistake, and we've seen mistakes creep in occasionally from Lenny Holland. I think Klaus will be hoping that the next one he makes is the big one.
Yeah, you make a good point, because even though it's Jokel behind him instead, Matt's also in third in the points, so he is another rival that's within striking range, and Klaus would do well to try and separate himself a little bit. Yes, he doesn't need to pass Lenny because he's not in the points hunt, but anything to build yourself a buffer between you and your rivals. This time much closer. Does he get a good exit out of Pelagio? He does indeed. We're going to check on board with Velez now, fourth in this train of what is still 5 cars, all tight together at the front of the field.
One thing I'm noticing about Lenny Holland is that he's much more aggressive on the exits. He's getting on the throttle earlier. He's tracking towards the outside of the corners earlier. And with the nature of this track, that's actually providing a big advantage for him. He's once again nailing the final turn and gaining that extra little bit of breathing room over the rest of the top 5.
These drivers have been in a bit of a stalemate, it seems, for some time. But bit of a move for Jokel looking around the outside of Nielsen. Not going to get him anything down into turn 1. Behind them, there is a bit of a battle between Terrence Tong and Andy Jenks, and Andy just went way wide. You could see he was still out to the outside of the background. Thankfully, he held off Reinsberg behind him and didn't lose a position.
Yeah, so it's the top 5 and then the battle for 6th that goes all the way down to 11th position. That's Jenks there getting back up to speed, having to keep an eye out for Reinsberg and Bakker behind. Mario Gonzalez and Peter Kummer are also giving chase. There's actually another pack of cars entirely behind them, another 5-car pack with McKinney, Matson, Adamczyk, Fairburn, and Holmes. This is very close here. We're not seeing anyone run away with this.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting that we've got these sort of stack-ups forming as we watch up and over the hill. Reinsberg having to deal with Baker behind him, as side by side as well behind them. That's with Gonzalez and Kummer. Kummer tried to make the pass but couldn't quite get through. He's now got McKinney behind him as these two plunge down through Corey and Tao, and Reinsberg is going to be able to fend off Baker, at least this time.
Yeah, just for the moment. But now that we are in the rhythm of this race, we're starting to see who can keep that rhythm the best. And it seems like in this battle for the top 2, Klaus Nielsen having trouble keeping the rhythm relative to Lenny Holland. Ran very wide in the right-hander, as I'm seeing a problem for Duncan James. He's retired from the race. And Joachim Bakker, meanwhile, jumping into the pits. That's our first scheduled pit stop of the race.
I like this call. Now, it's going to be risky because he could wind up in traffic here, but he was stuck in one of those trains. So we'll see if he tries to maybe jump a few drivers if he feels like he's quicker than them. And it is a very fast pit stop, 6.8 seconds, and he's out.
He is indeed. Nice quick pit stop there. That's roughly on the mark for Mark Collingwood as well, who pitted 4 laps ago. So keep an eye out for Collingwood and Bakker as the race goes on. We'll see if they can come out and clear air and nail their laps, try and make a run on drivers further up in the field. Bakker was one of the drivers racing in and around the verge of the top 10, but we keep our eyes on the lead for the time being. Nielsen once again right on the back of Holland. Now they're coming up to the corner where Nielsen ran wide on the previous lap. Does he do the same here? Aggressive entry, and he is a little bit wider. He's hooking up the apex, going for a late apex, but it's not helping him.
There's something wrong with the 9, and he's off course in the replay already. Trying to figure out where exactly that might be the Arabiatas, whether 1 or 2. And did not seem to help his case. So Gary Reese is back on course, but he's down to 24th position, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's no good there for Gary. he was 3 positions up at the time from where he started, so that's unfortunate. That's what happened to him. Just caught the curb on the outside, and around the car went.
So many fast corners around here. If you have any sort of ill-handling characteristics, it's probably going to be a right pain to try and navigate through this circuit. It got close down into San Donato, but we didn't see a charge from Klaus this time into there. Still, he remains hooked up to the gearbox of the 24 pretty much since the start. Dane and Fairburn also our latest to pit in this lap. So a few drivers definitely trying to go for an unusual strategy.
Yes, a lot of early pitters here, and I think if you're further back in the field, pitting early is obviously the way to go. You could try and get yourself out of those battles that you think might be holding you up, try and get some clear air, and gain by the time your rivals make a pit stop. But these drivers up the front, they want to go long. They've got that clear air ahead of them, at least Lenny Holland does anyway, so he wants to take advantage as much as he can before he finally takes his pit stop later on. And I think he'll be hoping that he leads his rivals into the pits, or at least tries to gain by pitting before them. There might be some form of an undercut possible at the circuit.
Also, we saw at the top of our screen another driver with clear air is Ben Leung. He'd set the fastest lap of the race, but he's down in 26. He actually got a black flag for the incident under caution that you mentioned earlier, where he spun. So he had to take some pain from that, but he's clearly worked up and ready to try and make up for that time, as we're not going to see another pass into turn 1 this time. Klaus still unable to execute out of the final corner.
Lenny Holland getting the fastest lap now as well. We are into the super low 1 minute 48 second bracket. So I think maybe those first few laps were just Lenny Holland getting used to the car, seeing where he could push. Now we're starting to see that he's got a bit more of an eye into his car behavior and is able to drive the circuit properly now, and he is gaining on everyone behind him. Nielsen might have to change tack here and start looking at a defense, because Matt Jokel is looking very quick right now.
Exactly. He can't just make moves willy-nilly on this one. As we take a look at Terrence Tong, still down in 6. Lost a position at the start. Hasn't really seemed to be able to make that back up. Just a note as well, we've lost our first driver from the race. Duncan James is our only DNF so far. Also, maybe Klaus is thinking long game here. Maybe he saw that stop-start, because we just got word from Race Control they are reviewing the restart because of what happened with that sort of go and not go and then go again that we got from the number 24. So this could be a very easy pass from the 04 if Lenny gets penalized.
Indeed, that will be hanging over his head. He'll be thinking about that quite a bit as we keep our eye on the battle for 9th place, Gonzalez versus Kuma. We're starting to see, as everyone's getting into rhythm, drivers are trying more to make their way past. You know, they've got their strategies locked in. They're still keeping their options open for a pit stop somewhere in the middle of the race. We are already past that halfway point, coming up to 15 minutes to go here. So it's crunch time. I think if you're wanting to pit, maybe sometime in the next 2 or 3 laps.
Yep, definitely within the window, although we have to remember it has been extended quite a bit because of those laps under yellow. Drivers could probably get to about 5 minutes to go, I'd say, around a circuit like this, so they can go very, very far into it. And usually in iRacing, especially in GT cars, it is quicker to try and go as long as you can and empty the fuel tank and then fill it up the tiniest little bit and get to the end. So I wouldn't be shocked if we see drivers try and use that one, but with it being such a wide open pit window, we now have the opportunity for drivers to spread it apart even more and do something different from their rivals, which, as we can see here, would behoove a few drivers such as Nielsen, Jokel, and Velez.
Indeed it would. Remember that the top 2 are chasing down a driver who is under review for how he conducted that restart. 14 minutes remaining, and Lenny Holland has a few more car lengths than he otherwise did. I don't know if Nielsen is backing off a little or he's just having trouble keeping the momentum up through the corners.
Yeah, it's hard to tell exactly what's going on because it looks initially like he was trying his hardest to catch him and pass him, but maybe is biding his time. Maybe he's saving some fuel. We don't know if this is the maximum that the 04 can try and push to get a move done. A little bit of a look to the inside as Jokel just kind of shows his nose in the mirrors down into turn one. Much closer this time on the exit for Klaus. And this is where he is typically very strong.
Yeah, he's focusing on later apexes. Lenny Holland, I think, pushing a bit too hard into the corners and compromising his line into following corners. That's what's allowing Nielsen to catch up. But again, once you get to a straight, Lenny Holland's strength, it seems, is getting on the power just that little bit quicker and trusting in the car, trusting that it will take him to that exit cleanly.
I can also see that Adam Chick has taken his pit stop. He's in and out very fast at 4.5. And we've got an update from Race Control. Leader will be penalized for violating PCA rules. Must maintain pace speed until green flag. Leader was at 80 plus miles an hour when flag flew at 13:09. There you go. So that is slam dunk for Klaus Nielsen. He is going to be our leader momentarily.
Indeed he will. Exactly how much of a penalty Lenny Holland is going to get is still yet to be seen, but I would expect it will be at least a drive-through potentially for Lenny Holland. And there we go. There it is, officially applied in session. It will be a drive-through penalty for Lenny Holland. Coming up to the final corner, is he going to respond instantly and get that done now? No, he's going to stay out a few more laps, try and keep the advantage up so that he loses as little time as possible taking the drive-through.
You get roughly 4 laps to serve black flag, so he's got time. Now, they have the ability to try and appeal on some of these things. I understand. I don't know the exact process, but you're not allowed to just get on the radio and complain. So I'm not sure exactly what needs to be done if he feels like he's been hard done by. But considering we even saw it, I have a feeling it's going to be hard to protest that one as we check a little bit farther back to Fernandez, who has been caught by Tong. Maybe he's Tong able to pick it up a bit here.
Yeah, we'll see. None of the drivers in the top 18 have pitted yet, and outside of the top 18, we've only got 4 other drivers who haven't taken their stops yet. We're still waiting to see how the strategy play works out for the drivers that have already pitted. Charlie Boyer, remember, he took the oh, hello. Things are starting to get a little bit dicey here for second, which is now going to be the effective race lead. Klaus Nielsen was losing time there through the Arabiatas.
And I was just going to say, I'm pretty sure that's why this has changed in complexion now, because Jokel knows suddenly, oh my goodness, I'm going to fight Klaus for the win here. And I'm sure that is not lost on Velez, too. We'll see if he tries to hurry it up, since he'll go from fourth to third. Now, once we see the leader pit in, is this going to be where Lenny Holland serves that penalty? Coming up to the pit entry now. No, he's going to stay out.
Interesting. All right. Well, suppose, I mean, he can't just not take the penalty. Obviously, he'll get an even heftier penalty if he does avoid it. As look at that around the outside for third, trying his best to get by is Julian Velez, and he's going to stick it up the inside here. Bit of a better exit from turn one, and deep goes Matthew Jokel. Easy does it, guys. You're losing time to Klaus Nielsen.
Oh, they lost a ton of time to him. Now, Matt had a successful defense, but it is a gap up to 1.5 seconds. And this is a driver that was moments ago looking like he might have a realistic shot to pass that purple and black machine. But Velez has distracted him, and now he's got to play defense.
Yeah, this is the victory throw that Klaus Nielsen was hoping for, and he's still trying to catch up to Lenny Holland in the lead. We focus a bit further back on David Fernandez, who's gapped Terence Tong just a little bit. It seems like the rest of the battles around the track have calmed down. We're not seeing much in the way of big passes, but we might see one very shortly here for effective second place. Lenny Holland still staying out. But wait for that front straight. Wait for the exit that Matthew Jokel is going to get. Whether or not Julian Velez will be able to get in the slipstream and try up the inside of turn one, because it feels like that's where you need to be.
And they tried it last time there, so didn't quite work. Maybe he learned a couple things. Maybe he's got a trick up his sleeve after that one. Regardless, if Lenny serves it, and he does, I was going to say Klaus is getting awful close to that car. As looks like Jokel is going to be just a little too far ahead of Velez. And unfortunately for that number 5, all that messing around still means that he's a good 9/10 behind Klaus Nielsen. There we see our former leader serving his penalty on the lane. And once again, getting mighty close to the black and green of Matt, it is Julian Velez.
The bright yellow car in the mirrors will certainly be distracting for Matthew Jokel, but Klaus Nielsen has the breathing room he needs. Just needs to make sure that his exits are nailed as per usual. Keep the corner speed up, look after the front tires, don't overheat them. Mugello being such a twisty, fast-flowing circuit, if you've got those overheated fronts and you're understeering through every corner, you'll be costing yourself seconds in lap time.
Good point. Yeah, you need to try and really take care of that car, of your equipment. Maybe try and save a little bit for the end. You got to push if you're Matt, of course, at this stage, but Jokel's got to try and make sure he's got enough to fight with Klaus Nielsen if he can run him back down. It is coming down, I will say. It's looking at about 7/10 of a second at this stage. In fact, almost down to half a second on the entry into the corner briefly. So it looks like the 5 might be a bit quicker than Klaus.
Yeah, he certainly nailed the exit there, didn't he? Nielsen is diving a bit earlier to the inside of the final corner, and that's gaining for him a little bit. Neither of them go for the pits this time by, but we are coming up to that 5-minute mark you called earlier, Joe, as further behind we're seeing a pit stop. That's Andy Jenks, who's jumped into the lane, and looks to me like Terence Tong was able to get past him on the previous lap, so Jenks responding as Jokel sets the first lap in at the 47s.
Wow, yeah, he is switched on right now. And he's starting to leave Velez behind as well. So this is good news for Matt. If he can find himself the right opportunity to attack, he will no longer have to worry about the car behind going at him here. As Nielsen continues to lead this race, having inherited it after a penalty for Lenny Holland. But I'm expecting, if not this lap, assuredly next one, they will have to pit in. Because I don't think they can make it all the way to the finish without refueling.
Yeah, the pit stops that we're seeing around about 5 to 6.5 seconds. And if you're curious about Andy Jenks's fortunes, well, he has come out ahead of Joachim Bakker, who pitted 8 laps ago. So it looks like the advantage is still with drivers who stay out longer.
Indeed.
Oh dear, I've just noticed Jenks has come together with Philip Milan. Milan had a bit of a spin coming out of turns 5 and 6, I believe. He is slow, but I think that they've managed to get away with that. Not much damage to either car. That has cost Jenks a bit of time.
And poor Milan was the only car that's a lap down at this stage, so he wasn't even fighting for position. Just kind of lost it in front of him, like you said, and they were racing so close, it all wound up going awry, as that is Jokel into the pits. He is going to try to undercut Klaus Nielsen.
Yeah, but has he nailed pit entry? Last week in the challenge class, we saw a lot of drivers slowing down too early for pit lane and not quite getting down to pit speed at the correct time. So He did look a little slow on the way in there. Maybe that's where Klaus Nielsen will still have an advantage.
Yeah, I went and checked, and he got to the cones at the right time. It didn't look like he sped, so I think he should be okay, but it depends on how aggressively he was trying to attack them there and make sure to limit his in-lap. Now he's got to try and limit the time spent on his out-lap as well, as we watch the 56 come back on track after, I believe, he had a stop, as well as almost 3 wide into turn 1, it looked like there with the group.
Yeah, indeed. It's very close racing all throughout the field here. We still have to think about how the gap for the lead is going to work out. I think now that we've seen Matthew Jokel come into the pits, there's every chance that Nielsen is going to respond here. I was going to mention a little earlier, Charlie Boyer. Remember, he pitted for repairs under safety car and also took some fuel. Boyer and Jokel are on track together right now. We're still waiting to see if Charlie Boyer has to take a stop again. I mean, there's a very tiny chance that he might be able to make it to the end, but I don't think it's all that possible. We'll have to wait and see on that.
Certainly looking like it's coming close, but now our drivers can't go any further. Pretty much everybody pitting in at this stage. And just as you mentioned, Charlie being with Jokel, well, unfortunately, he had an off track, so he lost a little bit more time. Nielsen looking for his pit stall. Velez, Fernandez following suit as they trundle down at the achingly slow 37 miles an hour and taking off very quickly. Nielsen, a 4-second stop. In fact, pretty much everybody behind him in the top 3 all taking a similar amount of time. But Chris Sherburne carries on. I mean, he's not going to be able to make it to the finish if we can go by those cars, Reese, but he's going to come around basically to the white flag and take his pit stop.
Yeah, indeed. This is going to be an interesting finish here for Chris Sherburne. If he's able to nail the pit entry and get a super quick stop, just get, maybe 2 or 3 liters at best, he might be able to gain quite a bit on the cars that he was racing with earlier. Well, the lead has worked out, and Klaus Nielsen has actually gained even further. Look at his pit stop. It's about 4.2 seconds. That is among the quickest that we've seen so far in terms of pit stop time. Julian Velez and Matthew Jokel were a lot slower, and Jokel by quite some margin, 6.8 seconds. So that has officially changed the battle for second. Velez now in that runner-up spot.
Well, here's the bad news. Velez going into that runner-up spot means instead of losing 7 points on his rival, he's now only losing 3. So it's a pretty decent swing that Julian has cut down there. And I know they're scored in second and third on that timing tower, but we're waiting for the very twinkle-toed Chris Sherburne to be able to take his fuel. And somehow he has managed to stretch this thing out incredibly far. There he is now. And yes, as I expected, he comes in.
All right, this will only be a very short pit stop, though. He'll only need to put in enough fuel to complete 1 more lap.
No wonder he was trying to push it as far as he did. He just about made it to the end of the race. It was 30 seconds shy of finishing on that lap. Klaus Nielsen leads by about half a second as we check in with Terrence Tong now. Back up into 4th. He's actually gained a position from here at this stage. So what we were talking about, he lost early on. He's finally made his way back to the front. Nielsen, so far this season, has won 2 races, VIR and Zandvoort. He's about to make it a 3rd.
Indeed he is. And he's certainly been among the class of the field here in what has been a very competitive category in Porsche Club America. Look at this battle for 9th, though. Peter Kuma and Brett Holmes battling, and Brett trying to make his way past there, but the Lego car just isn't. Oh, there we go. He's managed to find his way ahead.
That was impressive. I didn't think the Lego car could put together a pass like that, but that'll move him into the top 10. as a very courageous move on the final lap nets him just a little bit more, but it's not over. Look at how tight this group is. They've got to try and decide it soon as we jump over to Klaus Nielsen, just about 3 turns to go.
Yep, Nielsen driving a pretty much perfect race here. He avoided penalties, he avoided mistakes, he kept himself right in it all the way to the very end. This is going to be a very sweet victory for the 04.
Klaus Nielsen extends his points lead into the final round. Will that be enough to make it an easy day? Today it wasn't easy, but it tasted sweet as he wins here at Mugello.
Great performance from Julian Velez to make his way into second place. Jokel, meanwhile, completing the podium. Terence Tong managing to get 4th place in the end. So an extra position gained there. Looking at positions gained here, it looks like Brett Holmes and Chris Sherburn are joint most positions gained in the field. They both gained 12 spots over the course of that 40 minutes. Very impressive.
Sherburn crosses 16th and Holmes in 10th spot, making that last move to net him that tie for hard charger on this one. Impressive stuff. All drivers that are still running at the end are going to take the checkered flag with all laps completed. Philip Milan, unfortunately, did have to retire. I wonder if that's related to his second incident that you mentioned at the end that he got caught up in. Otherwise, 28 out of 30, finishing every lap of the race is pretty darn good. That kind of ties in with the close pace we saw in qualifying. Seems like you got to work hard to really get what you get here in the club class, which I believe is going to take us to the results. And as we said, Klaus Nielsen with win number 3 in Series 11, and Julian Velez will finish in P2. Matt Jokel will get himself a podium as Terence Tong jumps up to 4th on this one. Then it's David Fernandez in P5. Rick Reinsberg up to 6. Michael McKinney, a gain of 6 at the top of the field. That's a lot harder to do. So 7th place for him is mighty impressive. Jochen Baker will be P8, and Andy Jenks will wind up 9th, just ahead of Brett Holmes in P10. And then we got the next 10 here, Reese.
Yep, Peter Kummer finishing in the position he started. Mike Matson gaining 4 spots to finish in 12th. Mario Gonzalez, one of the unfortunate losers, down 1 spot from where he started. Patrick Adamczyk, 14th. Then Lenny Holland, the driver who started on pole. If he had just executed that restart according to the rules, he probably would have won the race, but he has to settle for 15th, 26 seconds behind. Sherburn gaining 12 spots up into 16th with that super long run, pitting at the white flag. Reba, Adams, Fricky, and Collingwood rounding out the top 20.
Then in 21st, it was Ben Leung, followed by Hank McCarthy in 22nd. Charlie Boyer winds up only 23rd, although it was still a gain, or no, excuse me, a loss of position. Just noticed that. Apologies, Charlie, today. So what could have been for him? Danon Fairburn, 24th, and Gary Reese, 25th. Then it was Matt Owens, P26 today, Scott Bowers in 27th, and David Glenn, last one to finish this race, 28th. Alon and James are only DNFs for this one. And the big takeaway for me on that, because you mentioned it, Reese, the speed of Holland says to me that both at Daytona and if he shows back up for Series 12, he's going to be a real problem for our front runners.
Yeah, agreed. This was, despite the slight rules mess up, a great debut here for that driver, for Lenny Holland. I'm looking forward to seeing what more we can see from him.
I am as well. But this is going to wrap us up for today. Make sure and join us for tomorrow, the last race here at Mugello, March 28th for the Pro Class. And a big thank you goes to the steering committee at PCA Sim Racing, as well as our team tonight, Reese, Ramir, and Cameron on social media. Thank you so much for watching tonight's broadcast of PCA Sim Racing. I'm Joe Peak. Race clean, race hard. We'll see you on the track.